On this episode of Lapeef, Let's Talk.
And know if what they've gone through is something that you're willing to be with and stand beside. And knowing, these things might come up one day, especially someone that's been abused as a child, however, sexually, physically, verbally, it might come up. But if you decided to marry that person, then it is for better or worse. Because you would want the same effect. You would want someone to stick it in and be with you. And it doesn't mean that that's going to be, we talk about marriage and how we're so easily and how we've always thrown it away. And when things get hard, then it's a divorce. But if you're there for the long haul, then you're willing to maybe take some time to work because it's forever. A lot of things that happens with a person with mental illness, depending on what it is, it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be forever your life.
I got another question. In some situations, in marriage in particular, you discover that people experience things with mental health. And when you bring it up within a relationship, like they don't recognize it at all. Women in particular. I'm going to speak about I know men have it, but the situation I'm thinking of, it's been some men that have found out that some women have mental health issues, meaning like anxiety. Would that be a grounds for divorce if it can't be corrected?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking everybody, anybody that wants to speak.
I mean, my views on marriage are that when you get married, you take whatever comes along with that marriage outside of like abuse. So other than that, I mean, anything could happen. I don't think that, for me, like I wouldn't just abandon someone because they had some mental health situation. No.
We had somebody on the panel and they said that was the one thing that they wouldn't be able to deal with. And I know how challenging it could be to be telling someone that they're doing something, but when you're telling somebody that and they're unaware, it becomes overwhelming.
Well, yeah, I think to your, I'm sorry, Kay, just really quick. I think to that point, JR, we kind of just in the public eye, I'm not saying it's the perfect example, but we just kind of saw that kind of play out with Kim and Kanye. And the allegation was for their divorce was that his bipolar was something that she could no longer stand. And I'm curious to know, Kay, what are your thoughts around that? Because I know this is something that you're passionate about when it comes to mental health and people dealing with mental health issues. And here it is, you have this family, whether we like it, love it, or agree with his choice of wife or whatever, you have this family, they have their children, and he clearly has admitted to having issues with bipolar, right? And even with this last release, they talked about how he was kind of off his medication and his handlers couldn't handle him, so on and so forth. So what are your thoughts around, people with mental health issues in relationships and marriages, and that being the impetus for the divorces?
My thoughts are, if you are going to marry someone, you are signing up for whatever comes along with that person for the rest of your life. You can't just be like, I'm only going to stay on this marriage if everything is just the same way as it was when I got married. I think that if you feel that way, you shouldn't get married. If you're like, oh, I don't want someone to, if this happens, I'm gone. If this happens, I'm gone. You shouldn't get married. That's my opinion. Because at the end of the day, for me, my belief is that marriages should last forever. So if you are not open to anything that can happen outside of abuse, then you should not get married. If you're not okay with having to, if your person becomes a whatever, you should be ready for that. Everything that could possibly happen outside of abuse. you should be down for as a husband or a wife.
I'm kind of curious what everybody else is going to say, because if I have an idea of what a relationship is supposed to look like, and when you married and you have that relationship, then you would anticipate it still being the same way. When somebody is triggered or something happens, again, it's for better or worse, right? But when something happens and they're triggered, they're not the same person. So if there's a situation where you're not communicating, and it's happening every other week where somebody just silenced because the other person is not saying what they want to hear, and it's been going on for months, what do? How can you have a healthy relationship if that person is not communicating with you? That means you're not having sex. That means you guys are not smiling, having happy times. That means that you guys are not, if you have children, the children are suffering. So then, and if that was the case, is that grounds for divorce?
If you feel that you cannot handle all of those things, you should not get married, in my opinion.
But you discovered it afterwards. You didn't know.
No.
Right.
You're not
So
listening to me.
Are you saying you shouldn't get married, period?
I'm saying you should not have gotten married to begin with.
Okay.
If you were not willing to try to work through all the things outside of abuse, because I know that's different. That's an extenuating circumstance. But if you're not willing to work through the ups and downs, maybe mental health issues, maybe whatever, then you shouldn't get married. Just date long term.
I got you. How you feel about it, Courtney?
As far as like with mental health issues, and should you stay married?
Yeah. Mental health issues. I mean, just think about the worst extreme, I guess. You know, it may not happen, but when people often get married, you know, it's a happy space. But I do understand, and I do know of people that have been in situations where they didn't discover things until later. Like, what the hell is going on? What the hell is this? And they're not prepared. They don't know how to process it, and they're struggling.
Yeah. So, I mean, that goes along with knowing your partner and their past. Mental health issues doesn't just necessarily just pop out the blue. It's a continuation. A lot of things has happened to that person that caused them to have anxiety. Something has happened to that person to cause them to have PTSD. Something happened to that person for them to go through a depression. It doesn't just pop out the blue. So it's knowing their past, understanding how it might can come out and flourish if they haven't had correct therapy with it, or even with therapy, stuff could trigger, but it's knowing who they are. So if you decided to marry that person before you get married, you should know their past and know if what they've gone through is something that you're willing to be with and stand beside. And knowing, you know, these things might come up one day, especially someone that's been abused as a child, however, sexually, physically, verbally, it might come up. But if you decided to marry that person, then it is for better or worse. Because
Right.
you would want the same effect. You would want someone to stick it in and be with you. And it doesn't mean that that's going to be, you know, we talk about marriage and how we're so easily and how we've always thrown it away. And when things get hard, then it's a divorce. But if you're there for the long haul, then you're willing to maybe take some time to work because it's forever. A lot of things that happens with a person with mental illness, depending on what it is, it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be forever your life.